Welcome, everybody, to the 2022 Bankrupting Fraud Virtual Panel Series. We're going to have your kind of debut session here. And let's kick it off with some intros, perhaps. So I'm Kevin Gosschalk, the CEO and founder of Arkose Labs. Great to have you all joining us. Arkose is an account security company. We focus on stopping bad actors getting into consumer accounts and stopping bad actors opening accounts, which leads to all kinds of fun things downstream. And I'm joined by our Chief Criminal Officer, Brett. Brett, you want to say a few opening words?
Sure. I am Brett Johnson, Chief Criminal Officer of Arkose Labs. And for those who may not know, I used to be on the bad guy side of things. United States Secret Service called me the original internet godfather because I established the first organized cybercrime community. Fortunately, after getting out of prison, I was able to turn my life around through the help of the FBI, family, friends, and the cybersecurity industry. Today, I'm very fortunate to work with companies like Arkose Labs and the clients that we represent and help protect against basically the type of person that I used to be.
Thanks, Brett. Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools and techniques the adversaries are using to profit, all the attacks that everyone that's listening in likely see and deal with every day. But I think it's really important to understand the motives and really what drives it. I think, Brett, who better to really kind of talk to what's the key driver for the cyber criminals?
Sure. So if you think about it, motivations of cybercrime, there's really only three motivations on why online crime happens: status, cash, ideology. Ideology, easy enough. Do you have a different political opinion than someone else? Is someone in disagreement with you? That's an attack motivation. Status, understand that some of these criminal communities are millions of members large. If you can do something that no one else within your criminal community can do, you gain the respect of every single person there, and that respect equates to cash, to profit. But at the end of the day, cash is king. 98 and 99% of every single attack out there is cash motivated. Criminals simply want to profit at the end of the day. It's fueled basically, not even basically, it is fueled by what we call it a shadow ecosystem. So you've got dark web marketplaces, you've got the sellers that breach the companies, maybe a man-in-the-middle attack, but they gather the data, they compile the tools, they sell those to criminals who then commit the crime, and then finally money mules work to cash out the crime, and everyone profits across the spectrum. You've got millions and millions of cyber criminals that work to do this, and it's powered. There's a couple ways that it's powered. You have the low-level types of attacks, which are human-driven attacks, which are very effective at the end of the day. A lot of the stimulus fraud that took place was human-driven, but you've got bot attacks that are out there too. Scaled attacks, which launch millions and millions of different types of attacks at once against a system or a group of systems. And finally, new attack surfaces. Understand that 90% of every single attack out there uses known exploits. Yeah, 0 days are a problem, but the real attack surface are these known exploits, and criminals are very good about discussing those, sharing those, and working together in order to victimize you or your organization. There are four guiding principles to cybercrime. The first is that known exploit, understanding that yes, 0 days are there. Yes, they can be dangerous, but the real attack surface are the known vulnerabilities, the stuff that we have been talking about for years, potentially warning people about, that just hasn't been addressed. That creates this large threat landscape that's out there. Understand that attackers are never solo. It is never just one individual that seeks to victimize you. It's a group of people. It's the people who are stealing the data, then they sell it to the criminals, and then the criminals finally need to cash it out. And a lot of the times that requires money mules. So it's a group of people together that attack you or your organization. And what are they looking for? One of four things, or a combination of these four things: information, access, data, cash. What can I find out about your company? Can I get pertinent information about your company? Can I get you to give me access? Can I steal data and then resell it on the black market? Or even better, can I just get cash directly from you? Understand, at the end of the day, cash is always king. That's the main motivator of all cybercrime across the board.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget is, when you're seeing attacks against your websites, against your apps, they're not doing it because they dislike you. They're not doing it just for fun. There is some financial guiding North Star that they're always going after, right? So these are really important concepts for people to understand, I think, in our industry. Because the better you understand this, the better you can think about what's the right strategy to raise the effort and reduce the return on investment for these style of attacks, right?
Right. Well, it's important to understand. A lot of people think that it's a single attacker, that they always ask the question, who hit me? It's not who, it's what group of people victimized me or my organization. Fraud is a business. Fraud prevention is a business too, but understand that cyber criminals operate these things as businesses. It's never a solo attacker. It's always a group of people that are doing this, working together. All right.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that, Kevin. So if you think about it, there are 3 necessities to committing online crime, to successfully committing online crime. Those 3 necessities are gathering the data, committing the crime, and then finally cashing out. All 3 of those necessities have to work in conjunction. If they don't, the crime fails. Why even try? Now, the problem with that, and this explains why it's never a single attacker. The problem with that is one single cyber criminal, one person can't do all 3 things. He can do one thing, sometimes 2, rarely all 3. So when I talk about gathering data, that's the stolen PII. It's the credentials that are used. It's your bank account login, whatever that may be. And it's also the tools that are used, maybe a spoofed phone call, maybe Mimikatz, Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance, whatever the tools are needed to go on to that second necessity, committing the crime, and then finally cashing out. The reason one criminal can't do all 3, there's actually 2 reasons. Either it's a skill gap. That specific criminal simply doesn't know how to do one of those necessities. He doesn't know how to do a man-in-the-middle attack. He doesn't understand how to launch a phishing campaign or whatever that may be. Or that criminal is in a geographic area where he cannot fulfill one of those necessities. And typically that's in the money laundering. If you look at stimulus fraud, a lot of the criminals that were committing unemployment fraud were not in the United States. Because of that, they couldn't withdraw in their home country. They had to rely on money mules in the U.S. to withdraw those funds so as not to raise any fraud flags at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating space in that sense. And, the topic really for today that we wanted to touch on is, what we're seeing with fraudsters utilizing automation and bots. They're making much smaller amounts of money per successful attempt, but they're doing that at such large scale that these are incredibly profitable operations. And as long as that profit ROI calculus continues to make sense, there's this continued huge investment in R&D tools, technology, proxies, data, whatever they may need access to make these attacks occur. So maybe we should we'll unpack a couple of these and talk to some more modern techniques we're seeing actually with automation and bots being used. Are really quite sophisticated too. Like these aren't coming from the same IP and like just basic kind of things. Like we're talking about like really sophisticated automated threats now that really blend in with your good user traffic. So you can't use rate limiting techniques and those kind of things that used to work, 5, 6, 7 years ago, really don't work anymore. So ATO, account takeover. Brett, maybe you want to share a little bit about why some bad actors might want to compromise your accounts.
Sure. So understand, when I was committing crime, really the only types of accounts that we looked at as a cybercrime group were credit card accounts, bank logins, because that's where the majority of funds were at, and it was easy enough to take over those types of accounts. Today, every single account has value. You can get information from accounts. If I take over your email, I can get information out of that. I can get access to your personal profiles, to data in a company by taking over an account, anything else like that. I can collect data, or I can even get cash. So if you talk about the way criminals benefit from account takeovers, you rewards points, you've got cash, you've got the ability to steal data or to install malware, any number of things like that. And every single account has value to a criminal, even as e-commerce accounts, for example. An aged e-commerce account has value to a criminal because a criminal can take that over. Sometimes it has card data attached to it, sometimes not. But even if it doesn't, just by taking over the account, the criminal now looks more legitimate than if he were to just set up a fresh account within that e-commerce system. So all these types of accounts have value, and that's why ATO is really, at the end of the day, ATO is the crime to worry about right now. It's horrible what's happening.
Yeah, it's the big one. And, the most common technique, of course, is credential stuffing. And this is because people reuse passwords. Everyone reuses passwords. Even people in this industry that I talk to is like, yeah, they're guilty. Everyone's kind of guilty, right? It's hard to use multiple passwords. And there's a push to try and replace passwords with passwordless authentication. We're not going to be there anytime soon. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that is. There's also the need to have legacy support flows to, if you lose your passwordless auth mechanisms, you still have to be able to recover accounts. So there's just some difficult challenges in that space. So let's talk a little bit about some of the actual mechanisms, right? So cred stuffing is simply the idea of taking hundreds of thousands of usernames and passwords and testing them just to see if they log in. Obviously, this is a bank example. You can use it on any streaming service, email provider, anything. There's obviously a number of defenses you can use against this. We'll talk about those in a moment as well. But the root idea is testing credentials on login flows across the internet.
Right. And just to add to that, Kevin, I mean, so the stat is that roughly 80% of every person on the planet uses the same or a similar password and login across multiple websites. So the reason credential stuffing is so effective is attackers know that. So they won't send out a phishing email that looks like it comes from your financial institution, but they'll pick a low-level target, maybe a streaming service or something like that. Your level of awareness is not as high, but because of that statistic, they're aware that 80% of the population uses the same or similar password credentials. Because of that, they have a pretty good chance of catching the login that they need to access not only your financial institution, but your credit reports, your tax information, everything else across the line. And that's why credential stuffing is so effective and so dangerous.
Yep, it's a good one. It's a common one, that's for sure. And there's a bunch of tools, right? Like the attackers aren't doing this. They're not writing software themselves. There's pre-built software. The OpenBullet is one of the big ones. This is a product called Sentry MBA. Effectively, what you do is you type in the URL you want to go after, and it figures out all the backend APIs. It figures out everything it needs to actually test those credentials for you. You need to go and get the credentials. There's a bunch of places you can either purchase more modern lists, or there's a whole bunch of free lists that you can go grab access to. Pastebin, you can search combo list, which is a combination of username and password, and you'll unfortunately find a bunch there as well. To make these attacks work at scale, of course, the attackers need to have access to compute. Hetzner is one that we see very regularly attacking the Arkose platform with cred stuffing attacks. Pretty low, cheap infrastructure that really doesn't have any regulations around how you use it. And then, of course, getting access to things like proxies, because if you come with the same IP address every time, that's also pretty easy to mitigate. So the adversaries go and purchase proxies where they can rotate through, as you can see, really quite cheaply to make hundreds of thousands of requests. So they can bypass things like rate limiting. And I guess education is kind of an interesting thing, right? So, adversaries share how to set these things up. You can actually go to YouTube to find tutorials on how to set this stuff up. And I know, Brett, you've seen plenty of adversaries sharing information around different communities, right?
Well, that's the issue. When I think what a lot of people don't understand is that cyber criminals are very open source. They network together. They share information across the board. Exploits, techniques, targets, all these types of different intel is shared on different channels. You can find it on the dark web. You can go on Telegram and find it. You can find it on Reddit. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on YouTube. There's any number of avenues that a criminal can go to learn how to commit these crimes, what tools they need to commit the crimes, what targets they need to pick, how to succeed, and how to remain anonymous. And criminals have been like that for decades. We've understood for decades that, hey, by educating everyone across the board, by sharing and exchanging information, that group becomes much more powerful and more profitable at the end of the day. So if you think about it, cybercrime is all about networking together to attack you or your organization. And that's a very strong tool that criminals have to work against you. Absolutely, Kevin.
All right, so that's ATO and cred stuffing in a few minutes. So let's touch on vishing. So vishing is a different technique, still used for compromising accounts. And maybe Brett, you want to give a bit of an example as to how does a vishing voice phish technique work?
Absolutely, Kevin. And as you know, there was once upon a time that I got vishing wrong, that I had my mind on smishing, and I messed up. But
there's so many different forms of ishings.
There are,
right?
but it's a social engineering attack, and there are tons of different social engineering attacks that criminals use to hit you. One of which is vishing. And as a matter of fact, there was a story in the news recently about these bots that were being deployed that were calling potential victims and tricking them into giving up their multi-factor authentication codes so that then the criminals could go and cash out on accounts. That's what we're talking about. Is a vishing is a voice attack which manipulates a potential victim into giving up information, access, data, or cash. So vishing it's very effective. It's very effective because we tend to trust our technology. Criminals understand that we trust technology. Criminals then use tools to manipulate that technology, and then finally social engineering attacks to layer enough trust to get that potential victim to give the criminal what he or she wants.
Yeah, and this one, so you're touching on exactly this example here. So basically, vishing used to be a pretty expensive thing. You as a person would have to call a person, spend time on the line with them, try and convince them to do something for you. That's kind of hard to scale. It's pretty expensive. You got to have people, right? There's a more modern variant that uses automation and bots, where you basically tell it what your victim's, the site you're claiming to be from. So you claim to be from a bank. What's the name of that bank? What's the context? Oh, it's a credit claim loss, or there's a bad transaction on your account. And then all the information about that user that you have. So what it then will do is automatically dial your victim, and it will say, this is an automated call from X bank. There's a bad transaction on your account. We've just sent a PIN to your phone. And actually what's happening is they're logging in with your correct username and password to the bank. And when they click login, it sends you the text message to verify that you're the owner of the account, but they're actually making the automated call at the same time. And then of course, you're gonna think that, okay, I'll give it my number. And in reality, you're giving the adversary, the bot, the correct PIN to get into their actual bank account. So this is actually a really powerful new way of scaling this.
I mean, that's a very sophisticated attack when you think, and it's a very sophisticated way that a criminal establishes trust with that victim, because he also uses the bank to help establish that trust. So that's the dangers that we're talking about with today's cybercrime. It's criminals typically aren't sophisticated, but the platform is, the sharing of information is, and using these tools to get that job done on the criminal side, very sophisticated.
That's right. Yep. So another one that I think is really quite interesting is, okay, what if we tie device ID and those kind of things to your login attempt? So now we have a device on you. So when you try and log in, we can verify it's the same device. Of course, there's a way to get around that as well, right, Brett?
There is. There's a thing called Genesis, the Genesis marketplace. So typically historically, the way an ATO used to work, if you were a human doing this kind of thing, you would go to the dark web on one of these marketplaces. You would buy login credentials for an account. You might get some of the PII associated with that account too. So if I were taking over a financial institution's account, your financial institution's account, I may pay anywhere from $20 to $40 for that information. From there, I have to worry about the cookie, which I don't have. I have to worry about the browser fingerprint, which I don't have. Sometimes it will list the browser fingerprint, and then I have to try to spoof it from that point. I have to worry about the IP. There's any number of different things that I have to worry about in taking over your account that have potentials for failure. So it became a problem for criminals. Genesis solves that. What Genesis does is it's a marketplace which has right now currently 400,000 bots for sale. These bots sit on the financial institution's website, e-commerce websites, any website you can possibly imagine, video games, any number of things like that. They sit on that, and they capture the correct credentials. They capture the correct cookie, the fingerprint, every single thing that they need, that a criminal needs to go in and then take over the account. And it gets better than that, because I said just a second ago, criminals are not the sophistication anymore. It's the platform. In case the criminal doesn't know how to use those stolen items, Genesis also has either a browser plugin or a browser itself that installs all that for the criminal, so the criminal can just go in immediately and log into your financial institution. We were talking MFA. Well, think about it like this.
Get around it.
It gets around it. What happens if you sign into your financial institution, you sign out, you come right back into it, you don't have MFA anymore. Same thing with the criminal. He has the correct token, the session's correct, comes in, no MFA all of a sudden. It's very, very sophisticated, very effective, and it is changing the way that account takeovers happen on the criminal side of things.
Well, great. So that's all the time we have. We've covered it. We crammed in quite a fair bit here around how bots are being used. Thanks, Brett, for sharing your perspective. And stick around for the next awesome panel we have coming up here in just a few moments. Thanks, everybody, for joining the panel.
Thank you.